Welcome to Techtastic, the podcast that explores the cutting-edge world of technology and its impact on society. New breakthroughs and developments are revolutionizing the world around us, presenting exciting opportunities as well as complex challenges. We'll explore the big ideas and key players driving these transformations as we seek to understand the implications of these advancements for our lives, our communities, and our planet. Join us on this journey of discovery and exploration as we navigate the fascinating and ever-evolving world of technology. This is Techtastic.
We're back with Ben Harris. We're continuing a conversation from before, and we've actually gone into a direction that's near and dear to my heart, which is the legal ramifications and commercial use of generative images. And we're just talking through potentially doing a bunch of t-shirt designs in the style of Nintendo, for example, and what that means. Ben, do you want to give a little bit of a preamble on how we got here?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who didn't catch the first podcast that I was on, I run a startup called Vigami, which has to do with basically an AI companion for video games, where we basically ask questions, be able to get answers based on whatever it is you're looking for. And one of the things that me and my marketing team are talking through are just like how we can, get some promotional content. And with AI tools being what they are today, now we have things like Midjourney, where we can get custom designed artwork by basically just making a description based off of whatever we think about. The world of video games has such a rich, deep history with artwork. I mean, that's when we think about a video games. If I have to say Super Mario Brothers 3, what pops into your head? Probably a big yellow box with Mario jumping through it. So I was like, that's what pops into our heads, because there's nostalgia driven with the artwork. The artwork that was put out by the marketing teams is what sticks into our minds, that positioning mindset that is so powerful with marketing. And when we have tools like Midjourney now available to us, the sky's the limit for what we can create with our creative concept. What Christian and I were just talking about is, what are the legal ramifications of doing that?
It's really a gray area at the moment, honestly. So I was just actually talking to a colleague of mine. I'm on the board of his company, the serial entrepreneur, a very smart guy, who was involved with Napster and file sharing. And he was in front of the Supreme Court at one point, talking through the whole DRM issue surrounding distribution of music downloads and all that kind of stuff. And he'll tell me why all content should be available for anybody to use, and that everything's derivative anyway. And it's a viewpoint that actually holds a lot. But the United States does have copyright protections. This is actually one of the things that makes it possible for you to, invent something and have some protection, that investment of time that you put into it isn't going to be immediately stolen and copied and put out into the world. And it's one of the reasons that the Industrial Revolution happened very well here, is that we had good protection. If you know anything about intellectual property rights today, China does not have those same protections. And so if you do any manufacturing in China, it's immediately being ripped off. There's no IP protection, you're done. So you have to balance the act of, well, I know it's going to be ripped off, am I better at marketing them, etc. The point of where that matches up with this derivative content being created by AI problem with imagery is, your intellectual property is only as good as your defense of it is. Like if you don't sue everybody that does something with your intellectual property, it's basically indefensible. There are certain companies that you have to be very, very wary of because they are very defensive. They should be. That's their whole brand. Like you could think of Disney. Their image is everything, and it'd be foolish not to defend that at every turn. And so if you make the mistake of doing something in the style of Disney and it puts one of their sacred characters into it, you're probably going to get sued.
Yes, probably going to get. In fact, you can probably count on it.
Yeah, this is weird. Like with music, there's a lot of lawsuits going on right now with derivative work. There's a really famous one that just happened, and I don't remember which way it was decided. It was just outside of my mental bubble, but it was peripheral enough that I was paying a little bit of attention, and it had to do with a chord progression, and whether that was the same exact, if that chord progression itself meant that it was derivative work, because these two works both used it and one predated the other. And the same types of questions are going to come up in this space too. Like, at what point does a color become something that you can copyright? When do you get to the point where it's intellectual property or not? Going all the way back to the foundation of the United States, when the framers of the Constitution and all that were coming together and talking about things, one of the subjects that actually was hotly debated was intellectual property rights and royalties around it. And it was in this conversation earlier today where that individual pointed out where we get the term royalty from and why we should be morally opposed to it.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, I hear that. I get that. And as an artist, somebody who puts creative things into the world, if somebody was to directly take and say that it was something I created, that's not legal. You can't do that. That's a forgery. But if they were to go and copy something I did, or even just take a photograph of it and put it out into the world, is that the same thing?
Yeah. So you remember those what were those image distorter apps way back when you like take your face and you could squish it and like massage it? I remember it was like something to do or something. I don't even remember the name of it. It was like an old app like back in the 90s. But that was the idea of like you could take an image, you could distort it, but it was the source image was what you use to make that derivative. Now, was that derivative distorted enough to qualify as, original artwork or something that was an original derivative? Like at what point, the threshold, at what point do you reach that level that it is truly a unique intellectual piece of property versus the original that's just been tweaked a little bit here and there?
Yeah, I had this conversation with a IP attorney at one point, and I don't remember the specific number, but I think it was something like 20% change. I said, great, define change for me. Can you describe when it comes to a visual?
And put it in math.
Right.
Mathify it.
Right. If I change the color, the hue by 20%, is that enough? If I change the saturation by 20%, is it that the whole image needs to be 25% of respondents don't think it's the same image? Like, how do we define what was enough of a change? And that's when you start to really ask those types of questions, it gets into this is why music's such a fascinating one for me. I think the reason that it was able to be quantified music and it can go through this like deep set of lawsuits is we have notation for it. We have a way of describing it because there's the music, the sheet music itself, and a layperson can look at that and go, that looks an awful lot like that. And so it doesn't take being an expert in it to be able to define how closely it matches something else. However, with pretty much everything else, there isn't the equivalent. I mean, in literature, it's real easy, right?
Yeah, I can see that sentence that is ripped off. I can see it. That is copyright. Copyright violation. You're out.
Right. But when it gets to this, now we're at a level of like abstraction where you've got these tools like Midjourney, where it's not just derivative of one thing, it's actually derivative of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of. A style is defined by.
Well, and here's the other challenge too: is like we make the assumption that what we've received is original. Like we're not necessarily. There's no real verification or validation that what was generated for me has not been generated before for someone else. We assume it has. I mean, and mathematically and based on what we know about AI, it shouldn't. Like the probability should be extremely low. But I don't know if you've ever built a script before where you expect it to create a random number every single time and then it creates the same number for like one or two instances. It can't happen, That's
what we call all random number generators. We call pseudo random number generators because it's an unsolved problem in computer science.
There is no such thing as a random number. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, the baby gate that keeps my dog from coming down the stairs just fell down. That's what that was in the background.
As long as the dog wasn't writing it.
Hopefully not. But this is actually I'm trying to remember what the term for it is called, but there's actually a term in the diffusion model world that talks about matching something that was used to feed it in the first place, like matching some of the training data. And they validate the models themselves on the frequency by which that occurs.
Well, and the other thing too is like there was an article. Actually, it was an article. It was a lawsuit that was being put forth towards Midjourney based on the fact that they're using a whole bunch of images to train their model. So there's I don't know how many millions of images that they were using. I think they were pulling from sources maybe like DeviantArt. Again, don't quote me on that, but just like wherever the sources were that they were pulling their training materials. So they didn't have the rights to use them for this training.
Yeah, they were. It was what is it called? I'm trying to remember. Those stock photography websites are the ones that are suing them, and like Getty Images and some of those. And it's because those are copyrighted work, and they did not get the copyright to use it, and they are commercially using it, but not in the way that the copyright's actually written. And that's why it's a really interesting lawsuit, because it's gonna
be one of those groundbreaking lawsuits that's gonna set some standards. I have a suspicion.
It absolutely will. And the way that lands will actually, like my current company, a lot of what we're doing is based on that particular problem. Mm-hmm. If you've got copyrighted work, how am I compensated? I would love for my work to be in your model, mm-hmm. because I'm being fairly compensated for it. I'd be happy with that. And people creating derivative work of it, even though that has a risk of like making me no longer needed, that's okay. Like people are going to, if I'm good at being an artist, people are going to want to copy what I did anyway, and they're going to create their own derivatives anyway. Mm-hmm. So I don't see a problem with that. That's just about getting your style into the world, and hopefully it's copied, right?
Well, yeah, and Midjourney it's a dice roll system. Like you don't know necessarily what you're going to get. I mean, you describe it, but you get what you get. Whereas when you work with an artist, you kind of see their portfolio and you can see their style. You can kind of see what to expect. Even if you were to take that portfolio, run it through a generator and generate something that was new, you'd get something that came out similar to that artist, right? We kind of know what Snoop Dogg's music sounds like. We kind of have an expectation what his next album would sound like.
Exactly right. And that's, I mean, you've just described Volley AI. One of the first premises I had for it has had a long evolution in the 6 months since I decided I was going to start doing this, because this world changes so fast that it's gone through 4 major iterations in that time period. Originally, it was kind of an art share concept, and then it transformed into, I'll give you a why, and that's how it kind of happened. I had an art show, sold all my artwork, had one particular artwork that a bunch of people wanted to buy, but I only had one copy. I said, hey, why don't you buy a print of it? I'll sell you a print. They're like, no, just want the original. And they're like, well, actually what I want is the original, but I don't want that crow in it. I want it to have an octopus in it or whatever, right? And I'm like, that sounds like a commission. I don't want to do a commission. Commissions suck because it's your idea in my style, and I don't want to do that. And that made me think about the generative AI stuff. And I went, wait a second, what if, but there's value in that. And I don't have to be the one doing it. It takes me, how long to do a painting to start off with? There's not a quick thing. So if there's a way of furthering my own, putting my style out there and furthering and creating more work that people are valuing and they want it, well, why shouldn't I do that? But then I've got to have a model trained on the Christian Hammer style. So.
Well, I don't know if we were talking about this on or off the previous recording, but the music, same thing. There's a unique sound everybody has, and I'm a classically trained piano, and I've been playing for a number of years, actually, since I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
But I have a unique sound, and it is uniquely me. It is different than any of my other piano friends. They have their own sound, and it's like if you wanted to hear this song played in the style of Ben Harris, this is how you're going to hear it. It's going to come out sounding like this because I only play it a certain way. I've developed a sound set. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart had a unique sound. Even though he learned from Haydn, he had some similarities. Haydn had a different sound. Like you can hear them differently. And the same thing with artists. There's distinct differences between them. And those are if anything, from an artist standpoint, that's really the copyright, is that unique thumbprint.
Yeah, and this is actually, it becomes such a complex issue because this is something that's been already decided. Style is not copyrightable, because how do you end that? At what point does it? Well,
see, the thing is, up till this point, we have been using the systems that we knew how to use to define. As of this moment in time, this period in history, where now we have tools like AI to basically train itself, we can understand stuff. Previously, we could not. And before, this is how we had to operate. Going forward, we have the ability to operate in a different way.
Exactly right. So now you're selling my story. So this is actually what we believe too, is that the technology is so outpacing the ability of governments to regulate that it really becomes about ethical consent. And if I decide that I want my artwork into the world, and I do want people to be able to do whatever the heck they want with my style, and I get compensated for it, I'm going to do that. And if they agree with that same premise, they're going to use the tool that does that. They're not going to go off and use Midjourney and try to copy it because they want to be ethically compliant as well. It doesn't mean that there aren't going to be bad actors that go and use whatever the heck tool and say in the style of Ben Harris. That's going to happen too. We just don't want to encourage it, and we want to encourage good behavior.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like when it all boils down to is data, right? I mean, it's a data story that drives our understanding of everything. Like take Vigami for example. Like what drives video game information? Data. What drives information about an artwork's portfolio? Data. So the more data, quality data we have to be able to answer questions, the right question. So that's really what this next wave is going to be about. It's about building that data. And one of the things I think is going to be challenging for these macro search engines, which again we touched in the previous podcast, is that they're trying to eat too much of the elephant at once. Like they have to rethink this whole process about doing smaller bite-sized chunks. So like if you're gonna talk about video games, be an expert in video game data. If you're gonna be an expert in movies, be an expert in movie data. If you're gonna be an expert in artists, be an expert in artist data. And that's how you're going to define your niche in this next wave.
I couldn't agree more with that statement. You actually, in a way, just answered a question that's been bothering me. So the search engine piece, like you and I said this in I think the previous one, and if not, it was offline between them, that like Google's in trouble. Google was in trouble, but now they're really in trouble. And I'll just briefly describe what I saw as the problem, which is content creators originally, when the world was new, they created their thing and it was put put into a physical form, and the physical form was given to others, and that's how they got value back, because it was traded, bartered, bought, whatever. At some point, we had the printing press. I don't remember when that was invented, but whatever. And all of a sudden, that same one-to-one creation and content consumption went away, but it was distributed in a bigger way. So now I can get it out to many, many people. And so, yeah, there was an intermediary, there was a publisher, right, that got in the way, but they were compensating the content creator no matter what. Continuing on down the line, eventually you get to a disintermediating point in which all of a sudden content has no value, not directly. I think it was the free daily newspaper that created this. It might have been radio because of music. One of those two. The consumer of it was getting it for free. The creator of it wasn't getting paid by the consumer of it in any way. There was no subscription service, nothing like that. It was via advertising. The web picked up right from that point, right? Like, we were creating websites, we're creating all the stuff, giving it away for free, but we're hoping that there's enough people seeing it, we get enough money via advertising to fix it. Google and search just capitalized on that. They did nothing new there. They just tried to make what was out there possible to find. What happens now when your principal interface is through these discrete language model tools, that there is no connection between the creator of that data in the first place and the consumer of it anymore. And there's no place for the advertiser to jump in anymore. It totally destroys the advertising ecosystem, which I think is a very good thing. But yep. I'm not sure how that particular, advertising.
Well, I'm sick to death of seeing kitty litter ads, so I'm just, I think we can do better. I mean, I'll get a little soapbox here. I've always felt that advertising has completely lost its art. Like, there used to be in the old days, there was an art form to advertising that, especially in my generation, we grew up in the 80s, and we saw quality, and I'm not going to call it quality advertising, but we saw advertising that actually had some thought about it. Be like Mike, right? It's like so there was thought put into it, and the reason that it was successful or it had any imprinting on us is because they actually spent more than 5 minutes slapping a picture on it, and then choosing the demographics, and then hit I'm going to spend this much, and then click buy. There was more thought that went into it than that. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that with things like YouTube and even some shorts. Maybe I'll give it to the shorts, but my point is that we have lost touch with how to properly advertise. It doesn't have to be invasive. It doesn't have to be an offensive thing. It can be targeted, but it can be valuable.
Yeah, fun, creative, interactive in a form, even if that interaction is just, you put a song in my head, now I'm singing it.
When you see a trailer for a movie that you actually want to watch, you click the trailer, you watch it. And it's like that simple connection is where so many advertisers just miss the mark, because if they just realize people do want to see content, you just have to present it the right way.
Yeah, the right way in the right context. That's one of the things that always offended me. Is it I've always thought of advertising. I used to work in the digital ad tech economy at a company that was right at the center of it. So I'm saying this as somebody who came out of that industry to a degree. I've always thought of it as parasitic. You're trying to put yourself between the creator and the consumer in a way that doesn't benefit either one of them really. Like, you're giving money to the creator that benefits them somewhat, and you are taking away the attention of the consumer, which degrades the relationship with the creator. And your point about there used to be thought put into it, this gets back to the easier it is to do, the more garbage is created, the harder it is to find the beautiful thing, like that creative, inspiring thing. And advertising got so easy because you weren't just buying television ads on 4 major networks, right? Like, where there's competition of dollars, which meant you needed to spend real money to get in there. Now it was as easy as saying, I've got $140 to spend. Here's my slapshod crap that I'm going to put out. I'm going to say buy, spend my $140, off and going. The ease of it is what created the garbage. Yeah. And now we're at the other side where I actually don't see an easy way for an advertiser anymore. I actually think that it's going to get really back to that. You need to give me something of real value or it's not getting in here. I'm not going to see it. I have no reason to. And that's a good thing.
Well, yeah. And it's the advertising is going to be, there's going to be more value coming. And that's one of the things we're working on with Vigami right now, is how we can incorporate advertising in a way that is meaningful. And I guess if there's any takeaway for the audience kind of listening into this, is that there are entrepreneurs who care. There are entrepreneurs who care and are tired of looking at kitty litter ads.
So I love that you singled that one out. Yeah.
Nothing against cat litter, if that's your business, but that's not why I go online. Just to be clear.
It just reminded me of another story. Like I will try to use any technology I find for what I consider to be a good cause. And I used ad tech to solve a problem that I was personally having, and I thought that a lot of other individuals might. And the problem was that my spouse is incredibly hard to buy gifts for. Not because she's a difficult person to be around or anything like that. She's amazing. It's actually because the both of us and most people I know, if I wanted, I probably already bought it. I already have
the same conversation.
Oh man. So how do you find that? I was like, well, maybe there's things she's doing online that clue me in.
Ask ChatGPT. Give me a list of original ideas for wife.
That was so generic. I did that. It was so generic.
You tried. Fail. We're using ChatGPT 4 though.
I haven't tried ChatGPT 4 yet. Mother's
Day is coming up.
Good point. See, another person that's hard to buy for because she bought everything that she ever wanted. But that's a place where, in that context, in that moment of you saying something like, what the heck should I get my mother-in-law for her birthday, right? That's a moment where advertising actually has a chance to add value. At least the brand or the company that has something to offer that might be compelling and interesting. But if in that moment, this is where the context thing comes up, if in that moment I got a kitty litter ad, I'm going to be extremely frustrated.
Well, that, or if you're advertising on a site that just doesn't care about that kind of stuff. I mean, just throwing out examples, but if you're playing video games, right, and you're going on and you're just trying to get game information and you're being bombarded with Valentine's Day ads, I suppose you can make the argument that you should be caring about that, but that's not why I'm on the website. I mean, let's be clear.
Yeah.
And I know that there are these services that have these generic, just default ads. You just pop them in, they just start generating ad clicks based off of whatever cookie information you got. But we can do better. We can do way better than this.
Yeah, and we're at that reset moment. I think that ChatGPT, et cetera, they're introducing this moment where there has to be a change.
Yeah.
It might be as simple as, I was at Nike for a period of time, and I'm very familiar with their brand Bible and how they think about their brand. And I can imagine, though I'm not current with that team, but I can imagine how they would approach something like a large language model and presenting their brand in a moment where you're doing something. So you might be asking ChatGPT to say, how can I run faster? And they would love to say, well, it's important that you have the right training equipment, and it's important that you have the right apparel and shoes because weight and comfort and blah, blah, they could list off a whole bunch of things that in that moment, it doesn't have to say you should try the Nike Flyknit, Vapor 2.8, whatever the heck the newest is. It doesn't have to say that. It can direct you towards it anyway.
Yeah.
And they would love to be able to do that. And as long as it's based on, it's not lying, it's not false advertising. And that's an interesting thing for me too, is now there's going to have to be a lot more truth in advertising because it's going to be very easy to look back and say, you made that claim.
Yes, very visible, very visible. That's true.
But it's fascinating times that we're in, and it's exciting to be at this frothy phase. I was saying to you earlier that I love the early phase of a startup where it's before you know if what you're doing is really viable, when it's all ideas and hope and dreams and naivety. And this entire industry is in that phase right now. It's a very there's so many things bubbling up so frequently that every day you're just seeing some of it looks like magic, amazing things occurring.
The speed at which all this is happening is overwhelming. And I've been in the tech space for over 20 years now, and I've seen things, and it's just this is unbelievable. There's a quote that comes to mind of just and information will abound, and that is totally where we are at right now in the time of history. It's just information abounds. This is fast information, and I thought Web 3.0 was going to be.
Yeah, I was there with you. I was very much blockchain is going to change the world.
It's boom, web, blockchain. Here we go. Nope.
No. I think that all those eras, though, we learned a lot from them, and there are parts of the Web 3.0 stuff that are going to continue on and be part of this continued transformation. I think that the edge networking aspect of it, the getting the content back into the you create data, getting the data back into your hand so that it's part of your identity online as you go around, that's a sovereign identity thing that goes around with you. I think that distributed ledger still has a lot of potential on verified trust networks and data transmission, all that kind of stuff.
Well, and I think that's the scary part about this AI transition, is that a lot of this is out of our hands. I mean, it's in the AI model, and it's the magic of the AI language processing and all that's happening behind the scenes. It's it's mysterious. And I think for a lot of people who are just kind of starting to get, dip their toe into it, it can be overwhelming.
So I asked somebody else this earlier today, and I want to get your take on it. I've been struggling, and I think I understand now why, but it's just a theory. Why did Siri and Alexa not create this moment the way that the large language models did? What's so different now?
I will tell you that the reason I never use Siri or Alexa is the simple reason where if I'm having a conversation with you and you responded to like Alexa or Siri, I wouldn't talk to you either.
So that's really close to it, that what I came away with too, which is those felt like I was dealing with an appliance, very similar to how you were talking about Google before, where I had to talk to Google like a search engine. Mm-hmm. And now with ChatGPT, I'm talking to it like a friend or a helper, somebody, a human. It's a human interface.
The interface, you're getting out of the interface's way. The interface was the problem, and this was what we learned with when we transitioned from Gamacy to VGOM, was that when we were building this, Gamacy was this database of video game information we were compiling into a front end. So for those of you who didn't catch the previous podcast, but for this with Vigami, we're basically removing the interface entirely and basically engaging you directly with a chatbot, an AI chatbot. And that AI chatbot, or AI companion as we call it, allows you to ask things the way that you would ask it in your own native language, whether you're good at English, whether English is not your first language. It's like you have the ability to communicate the way that you would communicate to anybody. It allows you to express your ideas the way that you express ideas.
So the thing I want to see with Vigami eventually is I'm playing a VR game in an immersive world, and I'm in this space, and there's my companion with me in the game as a physical manifestation.
Like an avatar.
Yeah, like an avatar, right? That's
a great idea.
And say, like, do I go into the haunted cave, or do I climb the forbidden mountain? Like, which direction should I go? What's the benefits of each?
As you get ready to go in front of it, it stops and says, "You shall not pass." It turns into Gandalf. And you keep on trying, and then it starts yelling at you, "You shall not pass."
That's perfect. That's exactly what I want to see it become.
Add to the list.
Yeah, please. Like, make sure it's in version 2.0 at least.
2.0, yeah, 2.0. Yeah, it'll go well with the Meta's VR.
Yeah, that's still a thing. Is that still going to happen?
I don't know. I have no idea. I did like the Oculus approach. I was very excited about Oculus until it got bought out by Meta, and maybe less excited. Not that it couldn't have been something cool, but I still have high hopes of VR. I've never smiled more playing video games, but it's definitely hard, and it's a tax on the body.
Yeah, there's the hardware with Meta VR Quest, or the Quest 2, or whatever the heck this thing's called. But like the problem that I found with it is it's low resolution, so you always know that you're in a game.
Yeah.
But even with that, it was an amazing experience. And then the second problem was, like, I use it with Steam, and I try to play like DCS with it, and it has no ability to connect my hand movements really with the things in the game, which it should be able to do. I was confused by that. But it's anytime you have to suspend that reality and get out of it, you kind of ruin the whole experience. And we're at that what's it, the uncanny valley with VR right now. We're like, it's almost great. It's really good.
Yeah.
It's fun, but it's
way
not...
better than it was in the 90s.
Oh yeah, jeez. I wrote a once very terrible VR simulation for veterinary surgeons on how to learn how to do procedures. Oh man, it did its job. It was terrible.
Well, I like I said, I've never smiled more playing games in VR, but it's definitely something that it's got to come a little bit further for it to become. It has to be something that is organic, and that's what makes this AI revolution so potentially just game changing, because it is organic. It is very easy to get into it. I mean, my dad, who is pretty tech savvy, but he's in his 60s, and he can jump right into it and start typing away, and he's getting response. Like, he's like, who did the sound design to Pac-Man? And it gives you the answer. It's like, hey, it did it.
Found it right away. Didn't have to spend 20 pages digging through trying to figure out.
No, magic. It just did it.
Yeah, that is it. That is the fundamental difference, which is funny because I actually went to school specifically for human and technology interface. MIT has a media lab. When I was going through school, Washington State had a program that was a combination between the fine arts school, the architecture department, electrical engineering, and the computer science departments. And it was really before this was like critical because people use computers, personal computers were around, but we didn't really know where it was all headed. And we were trying to play with all the different ways you could interface with things. But what was always important was to get out of the way. The technology is an enabling thing. How do we get out of the way of what the person's trying to accomplish with it? And all good UX is that. And that's what the large language models in their ChatGPT like systems solve. But what's really coming next for me is the tools built on top of it. Like what you guys are doing is fascinating on that front. But I can imagine what happens when you try to solve the same problem Expedia did, but you're doing it in this way. You got the travel agent type tool that you can interact with that knows your preferences and knows that knows all the things that you care about, and it can say, hey, by the way, on Tuesday at 5:00 you've got a meeting at this place. The nearest hotels are these are the rooms. We think you'd like this one. Do you want us to book it for you?
Yeah, it's like, here's my PlayStation account, here's my Xbox account. I just want to buy the game. Just give it to me. It's like, yeah,
exactly.
We want it to be something. Again, it's a companion. We want that companion to do things for you and help you out. And that's search done your way.
Search done your way. I like that. That's a great. Is that your tagline?
No, I just made that up. Put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Use Midjourney.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a little, for the podcast, there's a little unicorn when things go well, and then there's a little troll when things go bad that I designed a long time ago for a video game company, for a video game technology company. It was a social media platform for video gaming when World of Warcraft was really big and there was a lot of the MMOs really just come up. And it was going to be a social network so you could connect all your profiles together across those different things. And I created a little mascot for it when the site went down, which was this little troll. And he was like slings and arrows, like rocks were hitting him, and he's hiding behind his shield and he's reaching for his sword. And I repurposed those for this podcast because I thought they were freaking hilarious. And the social media site never took off.
Oh, man. Yeah, it was. That was actually, a little side note. I was on an MMO that didn't take off as well, and there was a whole bunch of MMOs back then. I remember there was like an MMO website chart. It was like tracking all these new ones that were coming out. At one point, we were like in the top 10. Like everybody was really excited about it. It died, but then it kind of got resurrected. I think it's greenlit on Steam. They rebuilt it. It didn't really. It was too late at that point. But video game journey, man, that's the way it was.
It's a fun industry in some ways, but it's also a really difficult one just because of everybody wants to do it. It sounds fun.
It is, and the gamers' expectations are so high. There is no subpar experience that they're okay with. I mean, there's exceptions, but generally speaking, it has to really wow them for them to get excited and be on board with it. I'm always impressed with people like Eric Barone, who did like Stardew Valley, or the group that did, Subnautica was a game I was mentioning. It's like that. It was an independent that became in something larger because of just dedication, pushing through maybe the negative comment wasn't so positive, or they had something just truly special that everybody just kind of just jumped onto. And that's the video game industry in a nutshell. It's like you either have it or you don't.
Yeah. And because everybody wants to do it, it's cutthroat in a very like brutal way. How is cutthroat ever not brutal, Christian? That's a great question from the audience. But it's brutal, and that also means that you never really get a chance.
Your thoughts.
Yeah, you never really get a chance to fail. Like in everything else, as an entrepreneur, you've got to be good at dealing with failure. Yeah. And in that, it's like one and you're done. You're out. You didn't make it.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. We
Fantastic.
covered a lot.
Yeah, we did. That's how almost all of conversations with me tend to go.
Good. No, I love it. We were good. I was going to mention, I forgot to mention this in the last podcast, but if anybody wants to follow me, I'm on Twitter at Redmond Gamer. So if you want to reach out to me and just, I post a lot of cool stuff out there, but also you can catch me on LinkedIn as well. I'm up there. I don't even know what my username is on LinkedIn.
Well, you're Ben Harris, but let's
not
see.
The Irish one.
Yeah, not the Irish Ben Harris. You are Redmond Gamer.
There we go. I'm consistent. Good. Let's go with that.
You can also find him by just looking up Ben Harris and Vigami, and he'll show up first. So, hey, thanks for joining me again on another episode of Techtastic. It was fantastic having you. Well, when you get to a point where you've got like some major announcement, like a launch or something like that about the platform that you're building out, I'd love to have you back on so you can talk about that.
Absolutely. I'll definitely keep you posted.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, and look forward to that next conversation.
And thank you for listening to this episode of Techtastic. There's going to be a 2-week hiatus while I am traveling around Europe. It won't be a Techtastic episode. I'm sorry for that, but I hope you subscribed. I hope you found this informative and interesting. And if you have a topic you'd like to hear us talk about, if you'd like to be on the show, the best way to do that is to email me at hammer@techtastic.tech.